Zrai scratched nervously under his beak. No doubt a bald spot had formed amidst his feathers there over the last month. Targ had just expressed his doubt about the human's intentions, just as it shone back up, catching the pair in the midst of their theorizing. Out of town, and away from help. Vulnerable. "We were wondering," Zrai began diplomatically. "Did you kill these people?" Targ demanded. He was still sweating and winded from walking to the hill. His tentacled anatomy made long-distance travel difficult out of water, but there had been 5 victims already, and Targ wasn't going to let a lead go in the investigation of their murder. Of course, the lead had not been found here, according to the human. Zrai flinched as the human stood back up, nearly double the size of him and his partner. Through conscious effort, he kept his wings from flapping in a natural flight response. They wouldn't have done him any good in this thin atmosphere anyway, and he was confident the human could catch him and Targ in seconds, even if they tried to flee. "I suppose I'm a suspect?" it mumbled. "Why haven't you looked into the human colony yet?" Targ pressed. The human lifted his hands, digits opened wide, and Zrai was sure he was going to lunge at them. Instead, the human seemed to be making a placating gesture as it said, "I'm going to. I couldn't risk running a full investigation right away. It could scare the suspect underground." The ground sank away beneath his feet again, and the human chuckled at the irony. "Is this hill hollow or something?" Targ did not let the subject change. "A human weapon is responsible for 5 deaths, and a human colony lies only not 200 miles from here. Why hasn't there been an investigation?" "I need definitive proof before I can dig around there," the human grunted, withdrawing another leg from the hole. "I don't know how your legal system works, but I have to prove beyond doubt who did it to make the criminal pay. If there's any doubt at all, any way for the perpetrator to weasel out of it, sneak out of it, they'll get away. I was hoping for more definitive proof so that I can lock in on the right suspect, but I've got nothing else here." "So we'll go to the human colony?" Zrai asked. "Well..." The human looked down for a moment. "I was hoping you'd come with me, Zrai, as the detective in charge of this case. Targ..." It trailed off. Targ nodded. "I wouldn't want to walk into the Latmus burrow anyway." Twin tufts of hair above the human's eyes rose, then it cocked his head. "Latmus burrow?" it muttered to itself. "You mean amidst predators?" Targ crossed his tentacles in front of him, a posture of indignation amongst his people. "So now you'll go?" "Don't have much choice left." "Now that I've caught you." The human's shoulders moved up and down in quick, short movements as a staccato of sound came from his mouth, and his voice responded with mirth. "No trust, huh? What would it take to prove myself to you?" "Your weapon," Targ said. The human shook his head and withdrew an L-shaped piece of metal from a holster at his hip. It pressed a button and a piece slid from the handle. He offered the detached piece to Targ. "These are my bullets. They're shorter, fatter, and rounder, and they fly a shorter distance, but they pack a pretty good punch. If I had killed your victims, they would have been mostly paste, and I'd have to have been stood in your town to do it too." Targ was not shaken. "So you have 2 different bullets. Just because you show me these doesn't mean you didn't use the others before." "That's not how guns work," the human sighed. "But if it buys your trust, I'll leave this with you when I go to the human colony. Just don't point in this part." It touched a finger to the side of the L away from the handle. "At anything that you don't want to destroy, and I mean it. Point it at the ground and don't under any circumstances look down the hole. You could end up like the latest victim." Targ shrugged, and Zrai got a strong hunch that he would look down the hole when the human left. "Now, there's a chance," the human continued, "that the killer will attack again while Zrai and I are gone. What buildings do you have made out of human materials? The abodes you guys have won't offer enough protection." "Their station is equipped with a light shield," Zrai supplied. "Can that stop physical projectiles?" Targ shrugged. "It's also made of human materials, double thick." "Oh, that'll do," the human said. "You should get the remaining members of your colony board of operations in there, and tell the rest of the townsfolk to lay low. Don't go on any outside streets, try to keep inside, that kind of thing. I doubt this killer is going to enter the colony, but I'm going to leave my partner here just in case." "Another human is with you. Why aren't they here now?" "Oh, Toby's not a human," the human replied with a grin. Zrai and the human made it back to the village quicker than Targ, and walked up to the shuttle. The human let out a short whistle that came out awkwardly low for his mask, and the shuttle immediately began to shake. The first to depart was the pilot, running madly away from the shuttle. A moment later, and Zrai understood why. A quadrupedal beast bounded out in a streak of black and brown fur towards the human. Dry's instincts were untamable, as his wings beat the air furiously of their own accord. With no way to gain the safety of the skies, Dry quickly huddled behind the human. Toby, as the human referred to it, was faster than any creature Dry had ever seen. It covered the distance from the shuttle to the human in under 3 seconds, and came skidding to a stop in front of the human's feet, digging small trenches in the process. It rested on his hind legs, a tail flicking back and forth, and 2 pointy ears and long snout focused directly on the human. A long tongue dangled listlessly from his mouth. Dry gulped as it saw a line of viciously sharp teeth. One of the creature's ears twitched independently of the other, and searched for Dry for a moment before snapping back to the human. "This is Toby," the human said. "He's in friendly mode right now, but he can be very business-focused when he needs to be." "What is he?" "He's a good boy," the human responded more to Toby than to Dry. "Yes, he is." The human reached a hand down towards the gaping maw of the beast, and Dry inwardly winced, but the creature closed his mouth and turned its head down to receive a pat from the human. "He's a dog. Pretty common pet for humans. And Toby has been trained as a police dog, so he can help keep you folks safe. If a killer does pop up in town, you can stick Toby after him to help catch him." Targ ran to the corner, panting, his tentacles dragging him forward. He looked up to see the dog and then looked to the sky. Thank gods, a quick death. The human pointed at Targ while looking at the dog and murmured a command. The dog strolled at what was likely a slow pace for such a creature over to Targ and began sniffing at it. For all his bluster about being ready to be eaten, Targ still went pale with fear and froze. The dog sniffed around him and circled him before coming alongside him and offering a single lick to the side of Targ's face that Targ felt incredibly obligated to accept. "I was just telling Dry that Toby here can watch your back and help keep you safe. If the killer does come into town, Toby can catch them unawares at the door to the police station. Just point at the door and say, 'Guard,' when you're inside. He'll get the rest." "Is he more dangerous than the weapon?" Targ asked, holding the human's weapon out, but carefully pointed down. "Well, to you, I guess. Let's just say they're equally dangerous and deserving of your respect. I'd like it, though, if you didn't send my dog out to be shot by a gun." Targ glanced sideways at the dog, which seemed to be panting happily next to him. "Sure, whatever you say, human." The human nodded, told Toby to stay, and then headed for the shuttle. "Can you fly, Dry? Seems our pilot is missing." The human colony was just under 180 miles away, but the shuttle ate away the distance in an hour and a half. Dry looked out the viewport to see a settlement made entirely of the large buildings made of human materials. Some were resting solidly on the ground, while a few were still higher on their stilts, slowly sinking. In the centre of the colony was a huge hole that spiraled down out of sight. The landing pad was rigged with gently pulsing lights, and the shuttle's automated landing sequence took over, so Dry joined the human in the hold. "Quick rundown," the human said as he entered. "This is a mining colony. Tithos like gravity made it easy to land heavy equipment, and the soft soil made it even easier to dig down to harder stone. There's a huge deposit of palladium pretty deep down there. Don't ask me more about it, that's all I know. It's made the colony pretty wealthy, but it's still a small one since the planet can't sustain large-scale human life. I called ahead and the mayor is going to meet with us. His office is pretty close. I don't actually have an office of my own here. I cover a couple colonies, so I work out of my shuttle. We can head there afterwards." Dry nodded along and opened his notebook. He was nervous and felt incredibly out of his element, but he had a job to do, and if he just focused on it enough, maybe he'd forget that he was walking into the Ladmer's burrow. The shuttle doors opened, and the view from the ground gave the human buildings a new sense of scale. Humans walked about, and Dry was surprised to see such variety in them. They were several different colours and had different amounts of fur, mostly on their heads. They also came in different sizes, from about Dry's size up to a head taller than the human detective's size. Most of them hurried by, focused on what they were doing, but a few of the small ones noticed them and pointed at Dry. Dry did his best to puff off his crest and look full of authority, but sensed that these little humans, hatchlings he supposed, would care less for his authority than for his feathers. The human stepped off the shuttle, and it rocked under the power of its suspension, nearly unbalancing Dry. A few of the little humans laughed, and Dry quickly hurried after the human, head down. Human offices were remarkably similar to the ones Dry had been in. They met with a receptionist at a mostly empty ground floor, who pointed to an elevator that led to another reception room. A secretary soon gestured them through some double doors, and within 10 minutes of landing, Dry sat before the human mayor. The mayor was more wrinkled than a detective, and lacked the fur on the top of his head. Instead, a thin layer clung around his jaw. He reached a hand out to the detective, and the two clasped each other's digits in greeting, talking amicably for a moment. Dry glanced around the room. Dry sat in one or two chairs before a large desk. There were a few extra chairs in the corner by a shorter table, and a few cabinets with labelled drawers along one wall. Behind the mayor were some personal mementos, photos of his family, a long plank of wood and metal, a certificate of some kind, and a key in a frame labelled New Jamestown. Dry's eye snapped back to one of the pictures. The mayor and two other humans that looked like him, but smaller, were smiling and holding several of the long planks like the one on the wall. In front of them were three deceased creatures that looked very similar to Dry, but with bald heads and darker feathers. Internally, Dry gulped. Externally, Dry snapped a picture of the wall with his notepad. The action caught the attention of the two humans. "See something interesting?" the mayor inquired. "Oh," Dry stammered. "I was just fascinated by the decorations." The mayor nodded and smiled. "Those are my sons," he said, pointing to the picture. "Luke and Jake. That was the first time little Jake went hunting with us. He was so excited to bag his first turkey." His eyes shined for a moment, but he glanced down at Dry and quickly moved to take the photo down. "I'm so sorry, that photo is insensitive. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable." Dry shook his head. "It's okay, human. I understand there are many non-sapient creatures that look like me. I apologize for my blunders now. But are you aware we are investigating several murders?" "Yes," the mayor nodded. "I was glad Detective Griggs has been able to help. Is that what brings you here?" "Afraid so," Griggs replied. Dry blinked for a moment, realizing he had never asked the human its name. "Murder weapon is a gun, and it seems the Xeno colony doesn't have those." The mayor grew somber and sat behind his desk, steepling his digits. "You think the killer was a human?" "Most likely. It's possible it's not, but a human had to have given the killer a weapon either way. How many guns does New Jameson have? I don't suppose you haven't heard any anti-Xeno sentiments either." "Can't say I have," the mayor said. "We do have an armory here for defense, a handful of assault rifles, one machine gun, and one anti-vehicle shoulder-launched missile, all under lock and key in the basement of this building. You want to look, I take it?" Griggs nodded. "And civilian weapons?" "None. The colony is owned by a mining corporation, and they set the civic rules. No firearms allowed. Not much room for them on our flight, either." "And that one?" Griggs inquired. "I bought this one as a memento," the mayor said, as he snagged his long plank from the wall. "But it had to be demilled per the rules." Griggs accepted the plank and looked it over, sliding a piece on top back and forth and making note of a hole drilled in about halfway along it. He nodded and handed it back, evidently satisfied. "We'll see the others, please." The three of them got back in the elevators and descended to the building's basement. The mayor continued the conversation. "All our citizens are workers here, and our workers are accounted for during business hours. Unless all these deaths happened on a weekend, it couldn't have been one of my people." "Nobody called out sick one day?" Dry asked. The mayor shook his head. "Only one, Frank. And trust me, he couldn't have done it." "Why not?" "He's been in the infirmary for over a month now. Frank's the reason we found out about the composition of the soil." Griggs frowned down at Dry, who shrugged back. "What do you mean, the composition of the soil?" he asked. "Oh, Dr. June will be able to explain it better than me. Seems the soil has a lot of air in it, and some of it is pretty volatile. Frank found a big pocket of it with his drill, knocked all his teeth out, and did a number on the rest of him. Been in the infirmary for about 6 weeks. He's recovering, but he's still not very mobile. Infirmary's by the top of the mine, big white building, if you want to check it out." Griggs nodded and proceeded into the weapons room they arrived at. It was small, with just 2 shelves on opposite walls, and a table pressed up against one side. Griggs examined the weapons there, a task more suited for him than for Dry, and took a few notes. He nodded finally and said, "Okay." The mayor escorted them back to the lobby and said his farewells. As he turned to depart, Griggs asked one more question. "Just being thorough here, but who has access to that room?" The mayor frowned for a moment. "Just me, the site foreman, and the overnight foreman, I think." "Who maintains them?" "I do. Used to be in the Marines, so cleaning the rifle is like therapy to me. My sons help when they aren't in school, but the weapons never leave that room. My boys never go in without me." Griggs nodded again. "Thanks." He led Dry outside and away from prying ears before whispering to him. "I'm at a loss here. The weapons in the bunker don't match the one that killed your victims, and the one in the mayor's office looks pretty unusable to me. Someone must have either made a new one or snuck one here somehow. All I can think of now is to check this Frank guy out. The mayor's kid should be in school during the murders, but we'll stop by there and see if one of them played hooky. Outside of that, I'm out of suspects." Dry nodded. "I get a strange feeling from that mayor. Do you think he's hiding something?" "For sure," Griggs confirmed. "He's got a lousy poker face." "I don't know what that means," Dry said, scratching under his beak.